This video is brought to you by my fantastic patrons. Join today to receive exclusive benefits from the channel. Link in the description.
StoryBots.
Hi, I'm Evan Spiridellis.
And I'm Greg Spiridellis, and we're the brothers who started StoryBots.
Well, we started a long time ago. So when we started, the internet was brand new, dial-up modems, and I was just fascinated with the internet. The idea that you could make something and distribute it around the world over a phone wire.
We started StoryBots because finding safe, high-quality apps for our kids was a real challenge.
We wanted our kids to have fun learning on these amazing devices and to build things that were fun for us too as parents.
Personalization is the thing that makes StoryBots magical. We have dozens of starring you books that you can put your kids into, starring you music videos.
At the end of the day, StoryBots is about making things that we feel awesome about giving to our own kids.
And building things that make families happier.
That's our mission.
Welcome back everyone to a StoryBots Retrospective, the series where we take a closer look into all the stuff that StoryBots currently has in its library. Previously, we took a look at how the Spiridellis brothers formed the once-known popular internet company, JibJab. We also saw how they grew to fame, what the experience was like, and how they eventually created the early StoryBots songs we all know and love. But now, we're getting into the big games. All the shows and specials that StoryBots is famous for are now before us. And what a way to kick all this off than with the show that officially put StoryBots on the radar, Ask the StoryBots. We'll of course start with their very first production of the series, Season 1. Now, watching all the early StoryBots songs last time in one go was definitely a new experience for me. And now with Season 1, yeesh, it's gotta be a couple years since I actually watched some of these episodes as a kid, and I was very curious on how this show would also fare in this new perspective. Well, coming out of this latest rewatch, I am happy to report that there are a lot of great things that I discovered, but also some not so great things as well. So you might be wondering, how does this show hold up after 8 years on the air? Well, let's find out. After the warm reception of Song Collections back in 2012, and its home run success of awards and accolades, Evan and Greg wanted to further expand their company with a full-on television series. Now, this was pretty big for the brothers. Compared to their smaller projects that they worked on for years now, this would become their first major hurdle for the company, as never did they ever attempt at making such a huge undertaking quite like this. But given their success from their previous projects, and their many relationships with various animators, designers, and musicians, they felt pretty confident with this new challenge. And not long after, production was swiftly underway. Before they could start anything, however, they first had to answer a question that wasn't really established before, and that was the main setting of the StoryBots world. The music videos that they made previously all had distinctive backgrounds and worlds that made them stand out from each other, but none of them ever fully exhibit the world that the StoryBots are inhabited in. So that begs the question, where do the StoryBots live? What is the main hub for the StoryBots? The answer? Computers. Inspiration for the environment would later kick in through various different forms of old technology in the early 1900s, such as switchboard operators, NASA workstations, industrial factories, power plants, and even World War II battleships to name a few. As for transportation throughout their world, tubes would be their main source of volition. This would also be inspired by real-life inventions, like pipe organs, durable habit trails, vacuum tubes, subway tunnels, and pneumatic tube systems. And on top of that, they also opted to have their world be connected to the actual world, having real-life locations be integral for the stories. And whenever it strays off from reality, they saw this as an opportunity to create model sets for these sequences, each one of them being made with different material, different tones to set the backdrop, and even puppetry to add some comedic effect, all being delicately made by hand. You can definitely tell that the team really wanted to make their world feel as realistic as possible, because they wanted to sell the illusion that the world that the StoryBots lived in was all crafted by human beings. Evan says as much in his interview.
Designing the StoryBots world was one of the most awesomely fun projects ever. Everything about the StoryBots world had to feel like there were humans that crafted this thing, and that goes through the entire production.
When it came time to produce final designs for the show, the brothers had a slight hiccup. They called in a bunch of artists to create art for their supposed world, and in doing so, hundreds upon hundreds of designs were made during production. But it was rather difficult for the brothers to pick a single design and stick with it, as pretty much all of them had so much care and passion within them. That was until they stumbled upon a design that would later be vital to the StoryBots franchise and would eventually become a main location for the StoryBots world moving forward. This design by Eddie West shows us an office for one of the StoryBots in the computer world, and the amount of elements used in this illustration is pure eye candy. It is oozing with lots of detail. Little bips and bobs help to bring some life into this ordinary office cubicle. There's lots of screens everywhere, there's many lights to illuminate the place, a lot of buttons and switches to press, lots of tubes connecting the machines together. There's an antenna for connectivity, a microphone, a mechanical arm with a pencil on it, stacks of paper with an apple on top, a microwave to cook food with. There's even a little bird cage next to the boss while he works. Like, how cool is that? All these things, all this attention to detail, just in this one illustration, really lifts the atmosphere of the world. This feels like a fun drawing to make, and it sets the bar up incredibly high for that creativeness StoryBots is known for in all of their projects. It, as well as many other aspects about this show, has love, passion, and character. Speaking of characters, the show would also be the first to fully establish their core cast of characters. Specifically, 5 StoryBots were chosen to be the major players of the series and to represent the company and franchise in future projects. This includes a middle-sized green StoryBot named Beep, a long blue StoryBot named Bang, a small yellow StoryBot named Bing, a large purple StoryBot named Bo, and a short red StoryBot named Boop. This group of StoryBots would be set as the main characters for this new show, giving themselves the well-known title, Answer Team 341B. And with this being their first proper exposure to the public, that meant casting these characters with individual voice actors was a necessity. The following people would be chosen to voice these characters for the first season and beyond. Judy Greer would be chosen to voice Beep, Fred Tatasciore as Bang, Jeff Gill as Bing, Aaron Fitzgerald as Bo, and Greg Spiridelis as Boop. Other side characters include Evan Spiridelis as the voice of the grumpy boss Hap, and Nate Thies as the 2 mischievous twins, Hub and Bub. The humans in the episodes would all be portrayed by celebrity roles, a first for the franchise, and would become a staple element in all future projects following this. As for animation and music, pretty much the same people from before make their return in this show. Taking back the pedestal from the previous song collections was Perry Grip, who would be responsible for many of the returning songs in the show, including the ever so elusive Great City songs, which make their unofficial debut in this season. More on that collection later in the video. Gabe Shokoloff, on the other hand, had a very big role in the show, being responsible for the main theme song itself, as well as the songs that play at the end of every episode, which will become a trend for the future seasons moving forward. The animation would also follow a guideline that would be very important for this particular show. For the main episodes, the character models would shift between 2 different animation styles in the stories. They would be 2D in the computer world, and become 3D when they entered the outer world. For season 1, the characters would use the exact same models from the Animal songs back in 2013, and were made using Maya. The models themselves surprisingly didn't last very long, as they would be completely overhauled when the next few seasons come along. But I'll explain more about these models and their oddities later down the line. Ho, don't you worry. We'll get there. For background music and soundtracks, the team had licensed background samples from the production music company, Megatrax, which, if you remember from before, had provided music for the Veggie Boogie songs and The Great Innovators. For the first season, they would mostly use rearrangements of classical music pieces in certain scenes, such as the classic William Tell Overture, Johann Strauss's Trish Trash Polka, and my personal favorite, J.S. Bach's Prelude in C major. Additionally, 2 other providers would become useful for the team, iStock and Pond5. Both of these companies would provide royalty-free stock footage for scenes that need them, namely scenes that have quick transitions from one scene to the next, such as these bow montages in Hollywood and Paris. So now they have the world planned out, the starring characters, the animation style, the music, and the set designs. But they still needed one more element for their show: the stories themselves. How would the show be structured? What would the StoryBots do? And what exactly can we expect from the show? The main premise for the StoryBots was that they would answer questions from kids all over the world. And it's from this single question where episodes come to form. In each episode, the team would start off with a question asked by the kids and build elements upon it. The questions would be your simple, everyday questions, like why is the sky blue? Or where does rain come from? Or why do I have to brush my teeth? The team would then ask themselves things like, How would we make this episode interesting? What can we add to make the experience as hilarious as possible? And what would be the best way to answer our question without totally alienating our audience? This is all revealed in the behind the scenes videos of season 1 for how they create these episodes.
To get started with storyboarding the episode, we were given a general outline. So we knew we had to answer the question, why do I have to brush my teeth?
We drew a whole lot of things and we just kind of decided on what we thought was the funniest and tried to just agree on where to put different things and how to like paste different things.
After we had decided the full structure of the story, we all split up and we all thumbnailed our sections and did an animatic, which is where you take the storyboard drawings and you edit them into like a timed out film and you add temp sound effects, and we have lots of really bad temp voices.
Oh my, what a travesty!
And then we just keep refining the animatic until it's time to actually produce and people start doing finished work to it.
So there's just a lot of things to think about, but with all of those different elements you can create something very intriguing and inspiring.
Now that everything was set in stone, the team then needed a way of showing their work to the public. The brothers consulted Netflix to air their show on their streaming service, with an agreement to label the show as a Netflix original. Production for the show commenced in 2015 and concluded the following year. And on August 12th, 2016, Season 1 in its entirety was released to the public, marking this as the first ever project to be shown exclusively on Netflix. Let's now dive in. Season 1 is a very unique season. It is outstanding in a lot of ways. It marks the first of many aspects of the StoryBots franchise. It was the first to use model props and practical effects mixed with 2D and 3D animation. The first to properly introduce Team 341B as main players of the series. The first to have real humans to serve as the backdrop in stories. The first to have separate voice actors to express each of their respected characters. And the first production to be released exclusively on the Netflix streaming service. All of that combined is woven together beautifully in a nice bow, and it serves as a wonderful introduction to the StoryBots universe and characters. Let's start this section off by talking about a detail that only the most observant people will notice at first glance, and that's how this series, in Season 1 at least, is a California-esque show. Now, with the studio being set in the heart of Los Angeles, there are many instances where it references its home base, and it rarely deters from that. The filming locations, for the most part anyway, are all set in the golden state of California and embody a lot of its features. Some are very obvious, like Hollywood for instance, showing us all of its scopes and locales that make it so famous. But then there are some that are less noticeable, like this forest and lake in the Rain episode, or this kid's bedroom in the Teeth episode, or this random beach in the Night episode, which they all only appear for like a couple minutes or so. Now, why am I mentioning this? You might be thinking, that is such a minute detail to the casual viewer. What makes it so significant? The answer actually lies within the core aspect of the show, and perhaps my favorite element of the series as a whole: the realism. The inclusion of the outer world in Ask the StoryBots was a very practical idea, but also a genius one. With this new ability, they can now explore these new places in ways that weren't possible before, and ones that we're all familiar with. It has always been a goal set by the team to have a world be crafted by human beings, and what a better way to show this than to put them in a world filled with humans. Every place, every location that they go to feels so vibrant and lively. They're all locations that really exist, places you can actually go to in real life. And sometimes these locations are cleverly implemented in the stories. Like in the first episode, how we can clearly see the sun going into the water in this scene. This shot could have only have been done in California, because other beaches would have the sun facing away from the water, thus destroying the illusion. They didn't just film this to have a random beach in their story. No, they actually thought of the geography of the sun in order to get this impressive shot. Or how Drizzlyland is a play on the words Disneyland in Anaheim, California, which again is another connection to the Golden State. These ideas are all ingeniously worked into these episodes, and it makes you think just how fun each of these episodes were to produce. I can bet every dollar I got that the team had loads of fun experimenting each and every location within these episodes. It gives the impression that these storybots are real, like you can actually go outside and meet them for yourselves in person. It's much more convincing than, say, a fully animated world, where everything relies on cartoon logic. I really don't think that StoryBots would have had the success that they had if it weren't for that aspect alone. The set design is also notably impressive, and very distinctive compared to the rest of the show, whereas Season 2 onwards we'll get to see more complex techniques being used, and how they present their model sets. Season 1 on the other hand, strides for a more simple approach, because of the limitations they had. This was all made in the old Jib Jab studio, so everything that was filmed for that season was either outside, or inside the studio. In every shot that was filmed inside their studio, they were very crafty with pretty much all of them. So many of these sets, like this western town made of teeth, or this messy art studio, or this giant amusement park set in the clouds, feels so realistic. There was a level of consideration made with every one of these sets that make it seem intentionally like it was made by humans. Some of them you wouldn't expect to be model sets at first, such as this French fry song. Okay, funny story, I actually thought that this song was entirely animated as a kid. So imagine my reaction when I found out the actual workings behind this set. To say I was surprised by this revelation would be a massive understatement. Looking at these models up close make you appreciate the finer details within them. I mean, just holding these models feels so surreal and unlike anything I've ever seen before. No, seriously, I have the actual props to confirm this. Thanks, Evan. The sets here are incredibly wonderful, and they did a fantastic job at paving the way for the future sets that we'll see in the later seasons. To put it simply, it's pure escapism, and nothing more. One thing I really like about Season 1, and StoryBots in general, are the episode concepts they use. I think the aesthetic for Ask the StoryBots and all other projects that followed this show was very clever and well thought out. The episodes are all distinctively different not just in its presentation, but also in its writing. There's a lot of elements at play to make sure episodes are never repetitive nor stale. And what I really think reinforces this technique is the unexpectedness factor. Now what I mean by that is, with every single episode in the show, it's always something you wouldn't expect at first. Like for example, if we're trying to learn about why we have to brush our teeth, did you expect we'd be exploring a western town with a sheriff toothbrush? Or if we're trying to learn where french fries come from, did you expect we'd be talking to a Matrix-installed mole and going to a potato spa treatment facility? Or if we're trying to learn where rain comes from, did you expect we'd be going to an amusement park filled with rides, attractions, decorations, and food stands? Chances are, no, you haven't. And that's what makes StoryBots so magical. It's never blatant, it's never obvious of what's going to happen. They always throw something new at the table. It never becomes predictable. And I feel like it would be a much different experience if we were to already know what's going to happen before the episode gets a chance to begin. If that really was the case, I think a large amount of that creativity would be lost in the script. That's what makes each of these episodes stand out from each other. The creativeness of these ideas alone are very different and unlike any other kids property out at the time. Evan also states how much he really likes this core aspect, and even considers this to be his favorite part in the entire show.
So my favorite part of the StoryBots show is that you never know what you're going to get. It may be a puppet, it may be live action, it could be 2D, it could be 3D, it could be all of the above. I love so many different types of art, and I'm inspired by so many different artists, and the beauty of this show is that if there's somebody who does something unique or special, we can work with them to do that within a scene. There aren't a lot of TV shows that have that kind of visual flexibility. Most of the time, you know what you're gonna get all the time. For us, we get the characters and the stories, but we also get like a visual smorgasbord, for lack of a better word.
Another thing I'd like to praise this season for is its cinematography. With a world so connected to real life, there's lots of shots that show just how big it is in its grand open environment. This isn't just a tiny world that they're in, no, it's huge, and this season is all for it. The StoryBots fit so well within this realistic environment, and it's a joy seeing them do stuff with actual real-life humans. Every shot in this season makes you appreciate just how wonderful everything is put together. Without any context, I think just seeing the StoryBots going about their day in the real world is very pleasant and pretty to look at. Some of these shots are very stunning as well, and the composition makes it all the more eye-catching. They almost make me feel cozy inside every time I see them again. There's something about them that I just can't describe to you all. I mean, seriously, look at this scene. Cinematography is an efficient way of capturing your audience's attention, used to great effect here. And with this being part of their idea of a semi-realistic world, makes it ever the more convincing. Don't you think? Compared to most other seasons, Season 1 is often regarded as the black sheep of the bunch, as in the one that has the most distinctive traits that make it so incredibly unique from the rest of the show. Some good, and some, well, not so good. And with that said, let's now talk about those character models. You know the ones I'm talking about. This is what I think most people remember Season 1 for having. Those weird, goofy looking models they use for all the characters in the team. Now we have seen these models before. The StoryBots and the Animal songs are the exact ones they use in the show. And there I think it works because those models weren't the focus in the songs, as the animals had the clear spotlight. But now, these models are the main things that we see on screen, and follow along throughout each and every one of their adventures. And with this new role that they now have in the show, this causes some debate. There's just something off about these characters, and I think this is greatly attributed by their size and proportions. And this is very evident when you look at the two types of models they use in the show. Like if you compare these models to their 2D counterparts in the computer world, yeah, they weren't scaled the best. Some are too narrow, some are too stretched out, and overall just feels a bit off-putting in my eyes. And in retrospect, especially after the improved models in the later seasons, it makes these models feel a bit dated in today's world. I think Jem put it best. They all look like the Android mascot. Now, I'm not saying that these models are bad by any means. If anything, I think it would have been completely fine if these models remained the same throughout the rest of the show. And I guess you can argue that having these off-scaled storybots adds to the silliness factor of the show, which, if that was the intention, I think it worked pretty well. I just find these guys more distracting than anything. I think the worst character to get this treatment is Bo by far. I don't know, she just feels so proportionally off compared to her counterpart. I mean, some angles make her look fine, but when it's off to the side and angled, it makes her look like a freaking trash can with eyes and eyebrows. And oh my god, some of these shots in this season just make her very, well, satanic. If I were to give these models some credit though, there is one thing about them that I really like. It's the little fingerprints and gashes they put onto these models. Now you wouldn't see something like this in the animal songs. Since the storybots are so far away from the camera, you wouldn't be able to see these smaller details. But now we get to see these characters up close, and their detail on the models is truly something to write home about. They give the illusion that these storybots are made of clay, and it works pretty seamlessly, and is in line with their idea of a realistic world. This is something that the later models in seasons 2 and 3 don't really have, so it gives these models an advantage over the later stuff, which I'm totally surprised by. While I'm not a huge fan of these models in particular, it's nice to see that there was at least some care put into these characters, even if most of the time, they do feel like a blemish. A trend I started noticing with Season 1 in particular was the amount of montages they use in the episodes. The season is very montage heavy, more so than any other season. And after watching a couple episodes, I came to the realization of just how many montages there are in this season. If you're not a big fan of montages, then I don't think Season 1 will be for you, because it is chock full of montages. Every one of these episodes has at least one of these montages shown. And personally, I don't like it. They all serve pretty much the same purpose. They are there to take away from the main story and to extend the runtime of the episodes. If you've seen one of these montages in an episode, you've probably seen them all. On their own, separate from the context of the episode, I find them rather enjoyable. Some of them I can actually appreciate for the little intricacies within them, and some of them are genuinely funny, and I'll get to those good examples later in the video. But as a cohesive story, I don't really see them working well together. I find it all just too distracting from what we're actually trying to learn. And therein lies the problem. The storybots doing random stuff is enjoyable, don't get me wrong, but what's the point in that? They're all just moseying around doing whatever, and not learning anything of note. Sometimes these montages are tied with a specific character, and then start to become a trope for their personality. But I'll get to that later. And what's even stranger is that this show already has segments that take away from the story. The Hub and Bub segments and the Fun Fact segments. Like, isn't that enough? Why do we need these montages at all? Was it to make the episodes more funnier? If that was the case, I think this would be a completely different story. But in hindsight, this probably didn't stick well with the crew, as the later seasons would fade out this sort of structure, only cementing this season even further. Does this bother anyone else? Or is that just me? I'm curious to know. The pacing of Season 1 is also very questionable. With the amount of montages that they have in Season 1, the pacing is just all over the place. It's never consistent, which is fine every now and then, but this happens in almost every episode this year, and varies from different levels of speed. Sometimes it's straight to the point, without any beats in the story, while others feel like they drag on for an eternity, and it makes every one of these scenes unbelievably slow. It's pretty hard to keep a steady beat with these stories because there's almost never a consistent pattern. At instances, these slower paced moments, as well as those unproportionate models, make scenes like this feel unsettling at times. Take a look. my god, they just stared for like a good 18 seconds in total silence. This is so awkward! I think a reason on why these episodes are so terribly paced is that there's no continuity at play. When we eventually get to seasons 2 and 3, we'll start to see them play around with this aspect in their episodes and experiment a few ideas to connect them all together. Season 1, at least to my knowledge, doesn't have this, and thus there's no real connection with any of the episodes. Like, you can watch these episodes in any order you please, and you wouldn't be missing out on anything. Not to say having your show be episodic is a bad thing, but this lack of connectivity creates some subtle continuity errors, which we'll see later once we get to the episodes themselves. I think season 1 could have benefited slightly if there was in fact some continuity sprinkled throughout. Then the pacing wouldn't be as jarring like it was before. Just imagine how much that would have improved had season 1 been just a bit more connected. Okay, that was a lot of negatives, I admit. I don't like being overly negative towards something I adore. Unless when I have to, of course.
I'm happy to help. I'm actually on my lunch break. Sorry, just a little rocky humor.
Yeah. So moving on to a much more positive note, the humor in season 1 is honestly pretty amazing. I can't really describe what it is about the season, but every episode I finish, I always end up chuckling like a madman. There are so many moments in this show that make me sit back and think, hey, that's actually funny. Now you might disagree with me on this, but I think this is probably the best humor in the entire franchise. Yeah, even more so than Answer Time. Shocker, I know. There's just something about this season that's unmatched compared to the rest of the show. I found myself enjoying many of these scenes in season 1, more than I initially thought. I swear, that penguin scene in the airplane episode still has me in stitches as a 20-year-old, and I don't really know why.
Excuse us, penguins?
Yeah?
Can you teach us how airplanes fly?
Why would we know that?
You know, because you're birds, and birds know how to fly.
That's racist.
And while it does mess up with the continuity a bit, I can't deny that the black sky scene is still hilarious as hell.
That's only because it's—
The sky is black! The end is near!
The sky is black! Run for your lives! The sky is black!
It's no wonder a lot of people remember this scene so much. It's just so random and out of the blue. I like it. And of course, how could I forget?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Whoops, wrong scene. Hold on a sec.
Yippee-ki-yay, Mother Nature!
Ah, much better. Let's wrap this section off by talking about the songs. Now, I've already discussed these songs at length before, so I won't bore you again with the details here. However, I did notice a difference this time with some of the songs this year, notably the color songs. It sounds like the audio has been enhanced a bit, like they were trying to polish it up specifically for the show. Here's an example.
Red love is red, love is red, love is red, love is red, 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 love is red, love is red, love is red, love is red, red, red.
I like this. It makes these songs feel more definitive than the original ones, and we'll see later in a retrospective that they will even flat out change the feel of the songs entirely. But we'll get to that next time. This season is also the introduction to the Great City songs, but we only get one this year, Great Cities Paris. I've discussed about these songs a couple of times on this channel before, and the potential they could have had if they had a proper release like all the other song collections. And personally, I don't get it. I think all of these songs would have been great to see regardless. Seeing all these locations and attractions would have been so different from everything else. I'm not sure why Netflix didn't like this idea, because really, I think it could have done really well for a broader audience. If these songs ever do get the light of day, however, I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, will be very happy to know that these songs were not entirely a wasted potential. And lastly, I think I would be doing an absolute disservice to this show if I didn't mention how amazingly the theme song is put together. Gabe Sokolov really put his all outs on this one. It's very upbeat, energetic, and it gets you pumped up for the show. A nice first impression, you might say. I think this is one of those rare instances where you don't want to skip the theme song because of how damn catchy it is. The only song that can really compete with this one is the Super Songs theme. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you consider this song to be your all-time favorite. At least for me, it's certainly up there in my books, living rent-free in my head daily.
Just as the StoryBots.
Season 1 was the first production to properly introduce their main cast of characters. Every StoryBot has a unique personality, some more in depth than others, but they all have one. Some storybots are very simple in character, with them only serving one real purpose, while others have more going on for them, having entire journeys throughout the seasons and coming out as different characters than they were before. Whether these storybots have complex personalities or not, by the end of the season you do feel like you really know each and every character. All it takes is a single moment or two focused on each character alone for you to fully understand what each one is all about. And what a better example to show this than right here. This is a scene taken from the very first episode of the season, and it's where Beep is trying to ask the knight on how night happens. But I don't want you to focus on the context of the scene. Instead, I'd like you all to turn your attention to the characters, and you'll start to see how each of these storybots are behaving in this scene. Beep is talking in a very friendly manner, and a good authority figure. Meanwhile, Bing is flapping his hands up and down, showing his fidgety side. Bang is nearly closing his eyes right here, showing that he's a very relaxed guy. Bo is staring in awe and admiration, showing her lovable side. And Boop is simply minding his own business, showing that he may be grumpy, but very open-minded. The episode hasn't even fully started yet, and already we can gather so much information about each of the characters in the team just from this one scene alone. And believe me, there's plenty more where that came from. So let's get into some of them. We'll start with Beep. Now Beep is considered to be the main leader of the group, and with her being a central figure, she carries a lot of leader traits. On the outside, she's very friendly, affable, and good-spirited to everyone she meets. But whenever the team gets distracted or veers off course, it's her responsibility to make sure they all get back on track, as a good leader should. Sometimes she might get fed up with all these shenanigans. I especially like this moment where she's just looking at the camera here and thinking, really? I have to deal with these idiots every day? Bing is mostly the cause for these problems, and every time he gets on her nerves, she will not hesitate to let it all out.
Bing!
However, she does have a genuine care for her teammates, such as here in the Rain episode, where she tries to comfort Bo and her fear of heights.
Come on, Bo! You'll close your eyes, Dax needs you!
Oh, for Dax? Oh, I'll try.
It's moments like these that show the best of her character, showing that she's not totally a bossy character. Bangs is a little more simpler. He's just a very relaxed dude. He mostly sees the world as a chill place and just vibes the whole way through, kinda like myself. Though sometimes he can be a bit delusional, such as here.
Isn't it obvious, man? Who's gonna know where rain comes from better than reindeer? What?
He also has this surfer-type hippie voice that I find so enjoyable whenever he talks. Season 1 though, I think Fred was still trying to experiment what type of voice to give Bang, cause sometimes his character sounds inconsistent at times. Take a listen.
Dudes, I think I made too much popcorn. I sure hope this helps us figure out how night happens.
Note that this all takes place in the same episode. Not really much to add regarding Bang in Season 1. He does get a few moments, but he's still the chill guy we all know and love. Boop also didn't really do much this year. He just kind of exists on the team, not really contributing much. But for a character that only says like one word, and usually depicted as one emotion, it is kind of understandable why he wasn't used much. Though, like Bang, he does get a few good moments for himself. I really like this moment where he cuddles the raindrop mascot in the amusement park when no one is looking, showing that he's not just a grumpy character all the time. That was honestly pretty cute. Bo, I think, was on shaky ground this year. I've already talked about this in the Bo video that I made a few weeks ago, but I'm not a big fan of how she was used in Season 1. Namely those montages where she gets distracted and starts rambling about the place she's in. While I get the whole point is all about her getting distracted, at the same time it also kinda messes up with the pacing of the episodes. Again, on their own, I find it pretty hilarious, but it shouldn't really be needed to tell a cohesive narrative, and it almost feels unnecessary to have in these stories. And also, I think it should be a given that Bo pretty much loves everything she can lay her eyes on, and this happens in almost every episode she's in this year. I'm not kidding.
I love popcorn! I love the sun! I love Hollywood! I love the forces! I love art! I love Paris! I love reindeer! I love...
Bo! We get it!
Though on the other hand, it is very much possible that this distracted side of her character was intentional, as the special that followed this season shows her overcoming this characteristic, and later becoming a much different character than before. And this season was also the introduction to her fear of heights, which I've already mentioned before would be a main staple for her character. And, on a side note, I also really like how she just straight up denies going up the drop tower again.
I wanna go again! Who's with me?
We're good, thanks!
Okay, that was pretty funny. But aside from those little moments, I don't think Bo really fared that well. While I like to believe this side of her character was intentional by the crew, as a standalone season, she just comes off as being a total pushover this year, and she may or may not become annoying for a lot of people with those distracted montages. Season 1, not her best season. But I think the character that did the best this year, and the one that I personally think deserves the MVP award, rightfully goes to Bing. If season 1 was anyone's season, it was Bing's. Of all the episodes this year, Bing was great in pretty much all of them. Every episode that he's in this year, he has one or two moments in the show that make him truly wonderful. In the first episode, he gives Beep quite the earful at the beach.
Is it night yet?
No.
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 Is it
fucking shut up?
In the second episode, he shows his love for Super Mega Awesome Ultra Guy, which will become a staple player for the franchise moving forward. In the third episode, he's the one to find the tooth under the pillow, very fitting for his size. In the fourth episode, he's the one to start the whole black sky scene.
The sky is black! The end is near!
In the fifth episode, he thinks he just got the answer on where french fries come from, only to get humiliated by everyone watching.
Boom! Nailed it! Question answered. French flies come from France. Call it a wrap, guys. Let's head home.
Bing, we're looking for French fries, not French flies.
And in the last episode, he tries to sling himself across the water, only to get eaten by a fish. Oh, and he can also apparently go as fast as these cars in this scene, which I actually find quite hilarious. I think what makes Bing so great in all these episodes this year is because, well, it's all a part of his character. He's short, naive, very fast, fidgety, a little stupid, but adorable. Just like season 1. He also has a tendency of claiming to know the answer to something, even if he's proven wrong the first time, which again, is very true to his character.
I knew that. Well, I knew that. I knew that. I knew that.
I don't think you knew that.
He may be small in size compared to everyone else, but never underestimate his powers. I feel like I really know him now thanks to this season, and that's why I believe he deserves the MVP award. Though personally, I think he should be holding on to that award as much as possible, because I think the later seasons will give the other StoryBots a chance to shine. We're also introduced to a couple reoccurring side characters in this season, the biggest of which being Hap. He's your typical grumpy boss at the answer department. He's always overworked, rarely does he smile, and he just never can catch a breath most of the time. If there's one thing that he really hates with a passion though, it'd be his coworkers dilly-dallying. In his eyes, anyone slacking on the job is considered a liability, and this happens in every single episode he's in. Just imagine the suffering that Hap endures on a day-to-day basis just from this alone. It could drive a man crazy.
I said I needed these files shredded, not breaded. I told you guys I needed the mail, not a quail. I told you I wanted my coffee black, not with a yak.
Yak.
The main troublemakers of the answer department are Hub and Bub, the two mischievous twins. They love pulling tricks on people, and sometimes with each other. In between the acts of the episodes, we get these little segments devoted to their trickery, and they're a nice break from the main story. I enjoy these guys very much, and they are a blast every time I see them. I especially like this moment where they just fall in love with this pink StoryBot, which we never actually see them do before. And of course we've got Franklin, the lead engineer of the fun fact machine. He's pretty self-explanatory, he's just the guy who tells the fun facts. And that's about it. There's not really much going on for him honestly, he's just doing the same thing in every single appearance. If he doesn't get mentioned in the future seasons that we'll take a look at later down the line, this is why. So bask in his glory as much as you can. We also have characters that are exclusive to Season 1. I won't go through every character here, but I will go over some that I think are worth noting. The first I'll mention is Sheriff Brushy, and I like this guy. He has a little arc in this episode, being once the proud sheriff of his town, only to give up his career because he found his job kind of annoying. I really like how his reason for not wanting to protect his town parallels the girl's reason for not wanting to brush her teeth at the beginning of the episode.
I don't like to brush my teeth because it's annoying.
And well, it just became kind of annoying.
Kind of annoying?
Only until he sees his town in destruction does he finally return and put things back to normal. Everything is back in order in his town, and he makes a solemn oath to himself that he will always be there to protect his people, no matter the cost. It's a fun little character journey for this guy, showing how even a minor character such as him can still have good moments like this. The Owl in the Airplane episode is very enjoyable too, an old mentor guy that teaches the StoryBots all about the Forces. And clearly watches too much Star Wars.
May the forces be with you!
The potatoes I also thought were pretty good, each one of them having a different desire for what they want to be, like french fries, mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, potato salad, even poutine.
I am going to be poutine.
They also have a song devoted to this, the Great Picking Song. And before I start getting comments about this fact, I am aware that this song shares the exact same melody with Jib Jab's year in review video of 2013. Take a listen.
So long 2013, it's time to send you on your way. Some will be chips and some hash browns. I wonder what's my destiny.
Pretty neat. Though I do have to question why these potatoes have such a strong desire. They all want to be picked by a farmer and turned into some form of food that they want to be. They even call it their destiny in their eyes.
It's when us potatoes fulfill our destinies.
Now, food, as we all know, is something that's mostly eaten by human beings. And whenever food gets chewed up and swallowed down our throat, it's no more. And if you really think about it, that's actually kinda dark. They're pretty much accepting their fate here. Like their only desire is to be eaten by a human and never live again. You could say that all these potatoes are essentially saying, hey, we all wanna die. Okay, I know that wasn't the intention, obviously, but I still think it's pretty funny to think about. Oh wait, I already made that joke. Droppy might be my favorite of the newbies this year, completely ignoring the obvious. I love how he's kind of like an adventure thrill seeker and adrenaline junkie, almost paralleling Bing there. Like seriously, that's literally me whenever I go to an amusement park. I just want to ride everything. I really love this guy, and I wish we got to see him more in other projects. Ah, if only. And finally, we have our celebrities. Now, some of these celebrities actually caught me off guard the first time I saw them. One of them being Jay Lendo, who, if you recall, met the brothers back in their Jib Jab days. I find it rather interesting seeing a person who recently got acquainted with the brothers, and now starring as a cameo in their show. I wouldn't be surprised if the conversation between these two went like this. Hey Mr. Lendo, we're making a new kids show for Netflix. Wanna be in it? Sure, why not? And then he got the role. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Prove me wrong. Some of my favorite cameos this year were Whoopi Goldberg, Kevin Smith, and Weird Al. Because really, who doesn't love Weird Al? I like how all the celebrities in this show are all depicted as fictitious beings, like a tooth fairy, or a superhero, or reindeer, or even Tiny Adams. Pretty much all the celebrities this year get this treatment, with the exception of Weird Al. But then again, since when has Weird Al ever been real in kids shows? Am I right? Season 1 has a very distinctive array of stories. Each one of these episodes are totally unique with the many different elements they provide, so none of them ever repeat themselves. You could say that all these episodes are memorable in one way or another, but which one is the standout? I think the season standout episode award goes to Why Do I Have to Brush My Teeth? This one gets the award for being the most different from the rest of the season, and the one that has an actual conflict. A town made of teeth is being raided by a bunch of nasty bacteria, destroying the town and their citizens. The sheriff of the town had seemingly disappeared, claiming that he grew tired of always protecting his town every day. But when he realizes that his town is now in shambles, he makes his return and fights the gang of bacteria. It's an idea that's very clever in concept, and one that's never been done before. A western town made of teeth is surprisingly hilarious, and totally unexpected. It also has a low character arc for Sheriff Brushy, showing him fully understanding his true purpose for his town and citizens. That's something totally exclusive to this episode. A minor character getting an arc for himself was very surprising. The model work is also very intricate, and feels so realistic. And would you look at that? No montages in this one. I like it. It's no wonder this episode sticks with a lot of people. It's very inspirational, and possibly what sparked the team to make more conflict-style stories in their future seasons. It's an overall well-constructed episode, and it should be a no-brainer why this one deserves the standout this year. Now, I don't think Season 1 has any bad episodes or anything, but if I were to choose the weakest episode of the main 6 this year, it'd have to be the first episode, How Does Night Happen? I will give the team the benefit of the doubt for it being the very first episode of the season, but man, this is a drag. The StoryBots have to answer a question on how night happens. So first they go to a night, because at least to Bo, the word night and night with a K both sound the same, so that must mean they're the same thing.
And who better to ask how night happens than a knight?
Okay. After the knight corrects them, they head to the beach. And then we get our first montage. And nothing of note really happens here. They're all just doing random stuff at the beach without learning anything at all. It's funny, no doubt, but very distracting from the main objective. They then go underwater for God knows how long, and before you know it, we get another montage on top of that. Two completely different montages, and they both serve the same purpose: to extend the runtime. Hell, the second one is even longer than the first, which makes it even more of a drag than before. The episode has already reached the halfway point, and so far the StoryBots haven't learned a single thing of note. I know I'm probably making it sound a lot worse than it actually is, but when you're trying to pay attention to everything that's going on, literally nothing feels connected. There's no continuity, and they're all just mere diversions from what we're actually trying to learn. I'm sitting at the back of my chair right now thinking to myself, come on, just get to the frickin' point already, please! Despite all that, however, there are some good moments that make up for it. The montages, as disarrayed as they are admittedly pretty funny. And I especially like this part, where we can hear tiny little screams as the sun turns the earth around.
And the Earth is always spinning.
That's how night happens!
Correctamundo!
Jesus Christ! Overall, I'd say this is an interesting episode to say the least. Not the worst we've seen, but certainly not the greatest of the season. I also want to mention the Sky episode as another contender for weakest episode this year. Now at first, I didn't really see anything inherently wrong with this one that wasn't stated before, but after some discussion with a certain doggy friend, I came to the realization of an error that kinda breaks this episode a bit. And once you notice it, you can't unnotice it, if that makes sense. In this one, the StoryBots have to answer a question on why the sky is blue. So they first go to Mount Everest to get the best view of the sky possible. Okay, so far so good. But when they arrive, they find out that the sky isn't blue, and it's in fact black. And for some reason, they don't know why the sky is black? Like, what?
Beep! I hate to break it to you, but the sky's not blue. No, it's black.
But doesn't that seem a bit weird? You already know why the sky is black. You literally spent an entire episode about this. And I just mentioned that a few minutes ago. How quickly do you forget? I guess I wouldn't really have much of an issue if, say, this episode were to take place before the night episode, then everything would have been fine. However, this is the official order that Netflix encourages people to watch them in, and thus creates this glaring continuity error. Aside from that little blunder, I still find this to be a pretty good episode. There are some genuine moments I like. The art montage was pretty delightful, and probably the best usage of all these montages if I'm being honest. I can totally see a bunch of art geeks getting all the references here. And I just can't pass up that amazing sunrise scene at the beginning of the episode. Very mesmerizing. All in all, this episode is very enjoyable, and at least it's not a drag like the first episode was, which I'd say makes it a caliber up, in my opinion. If I were to choose an episode that best sums up the season as a whole, my bets would go to the second episode, How Do Airplanes Fly. I feel like if I were to give anyone who's never seen StoryBots before an idea of what to expect from season 1, I think this one would hit all the right marks. It's an episode where there's hardly any continuity here, and all the acts are very disarrayed with no connecting plotline. The only exception being Super Mega Awesome Ultra Guy, who actually does have some continuity in the franchise. But that's a topic for another day. It also has a bunch of montages, including the infamous bow montage in Hollywood, very akin to season 1. But there are some bright spots. There's a good use of practical effects in this episode, including a little lesson on green screens, which is something completely unexpected. There's lots of scenes with impressive cinematography, and it's all wrapped up by a bunch of humorous bits in every corner, including one of my favorite scenes in the whole season. Yeah, it's the one about penguins again. That's pretty much season 1 in a nutshell. Am I wrong? But my favorite episode from season 1 has got to be Where Does Rain Come From? This episode does a whole lot right for me. Sometimes questionable, but mostly right. What makes this one so amazing for me is once again the incredible cinematography and model sets. I love the forest and lake backdrop that they have in this episode. It's probably one of, if not the best looking episode of the whole season. Seeing the StoryBots amongst the many trees and bushes, or alongside the rushing water in the lake is so breathtaking. Almost like you're actually there experiencing it for yourself. As for the model set of the amusement park, it's just spectacular. I absolutely love every prop they use in this set. The fact that it's all miniatures is what really works for them. And Droppy is a pretty enjoyable side character, like I mentioned before. If there's one episode that always brings me back to season 1, it'd be this one. I'll also bring up the French fry episode as an honorable mention. Again, I just really like the idea of these potatoes having a destiny that they want to fulfill, even if it could be taken the wrong way. The real life locations are outstanding as always, the idea of a spa treatment facility is both clever and hilarious, and Weird Al. It has a lot of Weird Al. Enough said. The word I would use to describe Season 1 of Ask the Storybots is quirky. Season 1 is quirky in every single way. Now, the word quirky can be used for both a positive connotation and a negative one. The positives of Season 1 are notably good. There's a lot of really great things to enjoy about this season. The cinematography is very eye-catching, the model sets are well detailed and have lots of care, the story concepts are cleverly implemented, the characters are introduced pretty nicely, for the most part. The songs are as catchy as always, and the humor is just pure gold, probably the best in the whole franchise if I'm being honest. Watching Season 1 again for the retrospective felt like a train ride from start to finish, with this one coming out as a very pleasant experience for me. I can really sense the creativity in this season, and it felt like the team had a pretty fun time with this one. However, it ain't perfect. As much as I like Season 1 for all its intricacies, I still have some gripes. The character models feel a bit dated, and are a bit of an eyesore at times. The off-scaled nature of these guys are sometimes a bit unsettling in certain scenes. The montages are also a big hindrance for me, with some of them dragging on for what feels like an eternity. And not helping was it being very distracting from the main objective, with it serving no real purpose other than to pad out runtime. And as a result, the pacing of some of these episodes are just all over the place, and it's almost never consistent. As a whole, Season 1 just feels very disarrayed from the rest of the show, with almost no continuity tying it all together. It is certainly not the best of the 3 seasons of the show. Now with that being said, do I personally think Season 1 is a bad season? I don't think so. I see a lot of people sort of writing this season off as being the ugly child of the group, in comparison to the other seasons later on. Usually when people think about Ask the Storybots, it's always Seasons 2 and 3 that gets all the attention, while Season 1 just kinda gets swept under the rug by most fans. And thus, I think this season is slightly underrated. While yeah, it is a totally different season compared to the rest, especially with those now outdated models, but Season 1, on its own, has a very unique charm that's so unmatched to everything else they made thus far. There was a clear effort into the production behind this season. They made sure that the model sets were as realistic as possible. They made sure that every shot in the real world was very pleasing to the eye. They made sure that every character was consistent in their delivery. And they made sure that the humor was always funny the whole way through. And for those reasons alone, I can't possibly call it a bad season. It's flawed, yes, but not terrible. And you know what? That's a good thing, because it allows the potential for growth. You start off with a solid, but not perfect foundation for your show, and then you grow from there. And I say this, fully knowing that the next few seasons of the show will indeed fix some of these kinks. But as flawed as this season is, there's always at least something that makes me want to come back to this one. Whether it be a very charming side character that you meet, or just the model work alone, will surely make an impact on someone. Season 1 may be the black sheep of the bunch, but a cute and fuzzy one nonetheless. For the next part in the retrospective, we'll take a small break from Ask the Storybots and focus on the spin-off show that aired alongside it, StoryBots Super Songs, which might come sooner than expected actually. We'll just have to see. Given how much of a train ride Season 1 was, I'm expecting this to be a bit more calmer than the previous one. But then again, this is StoryBots we're dealing with after all, so who knows what will be in store for our next adventure. Only time will tell. I want to thank a few people for making this possible. This video was an absolute blast to make, and I couldn't have done it without them. Big shoutouts to Evan Spiridellis for this one. He actually came up to me and asked to look over the scripts for this video. I was very surprised at first, but then I agreed. And man, what a difference it was. It turns out I got some things wrong initially the first time, and Evan was more than happy to correct the errors I made, as well as providing me some background knowledge behind the scenes. What a better source to have than the main guy himself, right? Also big shout out to Jeff Gill, who also provided me some information regarding the production of Season 1, as well as correcting some stuff from the previous part, such as confirming that John Frizzle was indeed the composer of the classic songs like I initially speculated, and the animal songs being sourced from a company called Green Screen Animals. You two are incredibly helpful with these types of videos. The quality just wouldn't be there without your knowledge. I really appreciate all the help from you guys, and I can't wait to chat with you guys very soon. Speaking of the brothers, I'm pretty sure most of you are aware by now of what's going to happen this November. If you haven't heard the news yet, there will be a public livestream coming to the channel, where I'll be talking with the actual brothers themselves on call for the very first time. In that, we'll answer some questions from fellow fans, as well as a few other surprises along the way. The details of the livestream will be listed down below. I cannot wait to see you all there, cause it's gonna be one heck of a night with the brothers. And that is something that I personally do not want you to miss. I also want to thank you all for the overwhelmingly positive reception to the bow video that I made a few weeks ago. I have made a lot of videos this past year, but this one holds a very special place in my heart. It came together surprisingly well, and it might just be my favorite video that I've made this year. If you haven't seen this one, then I absolutely recommend you do so. And for those of you who are wondering about the next character analysis, don't you worry. Bang's analysis is slowly coming together. Not sure if I'll have it out this year or the next, but it'll be here regardless. And that's pretty much all the news I have for you. As always, make sure you keep up to date with any further projects that I have in the future. Have a spectacular day, everyone, and I'll catch you all next time.